So in today's class, we will talk about the three main proponents of structuralism. Claude Levi-Strauss, who is the originator of structuralism, then Michel Foucault and Louis Althusser. He is a Marxist philosopher. I also try to cover Roland Barthes, but later on I realized that without understanding post-structuralism, it is very difficult to understand Roland Barthes because most of his ideas are taken from post-structuralism. So he is also one among them who started his journey from structuralism and then finished in post-structuralism. So I'll cover Roland Barthes in post-structuralism. So we have the three main propounders: Claude Levi-Strauss, Michel Foucault, and Louis Althusser. Claude Levi-Strauss was a French anthropologist. He was born in Belgium, and he was a French anthropologist. That is the reason that structuralism is supposed to be started in France. Anthropologist means the one who study about human beings. And ethnologist, he was also an ethnologist. Ethnologist means the one who study the characteristics of human beings, different characteristics in different cultures. So he was an anthropologist as well as an ethnologist, and he was the key person in the development of structuralism, and he applied the theory of structuralism in anthropology. That is the beauty of his work. He applied structuralism in the study of human beings. So he started studying human beings from the structuralist point of view. That we will see how. He sought to apply the structuralist linguistic of Ferdinand de Saussure to anthropology, and he argued that there are two types of mind. One is called savage mind and the other is called civilized mind. एक सभ्य और एक असभ्य. Savage means असभ्य, गवार, or civilized means sabhya, educated. So these two concepts given by Levi-Strauss, savage mind and civilized mind, and these terms appeared in his book The Savage Mind. The Savage Mind is the name of the book by Claude Levi-Strauss. So what was the argument of creating these two terms, savage mind and civilized mind? He said that both minds are equal and they both are the human characteristics, and if we compare a savage mind with a civilized mind, both are same everywhere. तो किसी के माइंड को हम ये नहीं कर सकते कि तुम्हारा माइंड जो है वो savage है या तुम्हारा माइंड civilized है. So I'll explain this term in detail. These observations culminated into his famous book Tristis Tropics, that established his position as one of the central figures in structuralist school of thought. He argued that keen to Saussure's notion of linguistic value, families acquire determinate identities only through relation with one another. In structuralism, we found that a meaning of a word cannot be understood in isolation. So a meaning of a word is only decided in relation to the other word. Like I have given the example of chair and a cow.
It's like binary opposition.
Like binary oppositions. So Strauss says that can we apply those structuralist theory to our family? That means a member of a family cannot be identified in isolation, cannot exist in isolation. They only exist in relation to others. So that is called structural anthropology. And his main focus was to the secondary families. Families are regarded as the primary, means without family one cannot exist. अगर किसी की फैमिली में आइडेंटिटी पता करनी है तो we have to identify in relation to others. Okay. Can you see the board here?
Yes,
No,
sir. Yes, sir.
no, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
here.
what is written here?
13.
13.
13. Anything else?
B.
B, letter B.
B. Anything else?
One
M.
Letter M, letter
M.
M,
I.
N1.
Okay, right.
M.
So we can interpret one thing in different manners, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now the result is sure.
Yes,
Is there any
sir.
doubt now?
No.
No, sir.
No doubt. That means the existence of this B is only in relation to A and C.
And
C.
So this was the concept taken by Claude Levi-Strauss, that a family member like B is only exists because there is A and C. If there is no A and C, B does not exist. So this was the concept given by Claude Levi-Strauss, that is called structural anthropology. He also applied the structuralist approach to myth. So he is also regarded as one of the philosopher from the myth, that is called archetypal criticism or myth criticism. So he also comes under myth criticism. He sees a basic paradox in the study of myth. He says that whatever is written in the myth is like a paradox. Everyone is having their own interpretation. One can interpret Mahabharata, Ramayana like their own. Whatever the way they think, they can interpret and they can take out their meaning according to their own. So that is like a paradox. So he said that on one hand, mythical stories are fantastic and unpredictable. The content of myth seems completely arbitrary. Arbitrary means the meaning is undecidable. There are plenty of meanings. So he was related to anthropology as well as myth criticism. And for that he coined a term, mythism. This term is very popular by Claude Levi-Strauss. Mythism, that is a term derived from myth. So this term was derived in structural influence study of mythology. So he applied structuralism in mythology also. That means to understand a mythology, we cannot rely only a single mythology. We need to understand other mythology also. One mythology cannot exist in isolation. His very famous work is The Savage Mind, in which he derived the very two famous terms, that is the savage mind and the civilized mind. The Savage Mind appeared in 1962. It was a work of structural anthropology. That means anthropology was interpreted from the point of view of structuralism. And to explain this term, that is a savage mind and a civilized mind, he used a comparative study of a bricklayer and an engineer. So what was that study that we must know? So this term is called bricolage or bricklayer. So there has been questions like who coined the term bricolage or bricolier.
अड़े होंगे नीचे.
So the Savage Mind that appeared in 1962, Claude Levi-Strauss, the structure of human consciousness, to make the point that all human beings are capable of same mental process. This altogether looks like a psychological work. Savage Mind. हर आदमी का दिमाग एक तरह से काम करता है. This is the altogether view of Claude Levi-Strauss. Whether it's a civilized mind or savage mind. So he developed the comparison of a bricklayer and an engineer in this book to explain a savage mind and a civilized mind. So what is bricklayer? Bricklayer has its origin in the old French verb bricoler, which referred to extraneous movement in ball games, billiards, hunting and shooting, riding, etc. But nowadays, means in the view of Claude Levi-Strauss, bricoler means a tinker. Do you know what is tinker? What is the meaning of tinker? ये जो door to door, the one who visits door to door to repair the utensils is called a tinker. Like pressure cooker बनाने वाला, stove बनाने वाला, जो door to door घूमता है, that is called a tinker. Okay. So bricklayer here is a tinker, and a tinker is having a savage mind, a sabya dimag, gawar dimag, and engineer is having a civilized mind. So that is the reason these two terms are taken by Claude Levi-Strauss. One is bricklayer and the other is engineer. So in comparison to the true craftsman, who is the true craftsman? Engineer. Engineer is the true craftsman, whereas bricklayer is the one who is having the savage mind. So bricklayer is adept at many tasks and at putting pre-existing things together in new ways, adapting his project to finite stock of materials and tools. So bricklayer or the tinker is also doing the same things, just like engineer, but the way is different. Like he is also repairing so many things, making unassembled things into assembled things, unrepaired things into repaired things. The engineer deals with projects in their entirety, conceiving and procuring all the necessary materials and tools to suit his own project. So both are having their own project. Bricklayer is also having his own project. Engineer is also having own project. Then why we can say that he is having a savage mind and one is having a civilized mind? So Strauss says that bricklayer approximate the savage mind and engineer approximate the scientific mind is wrong. He says that universe of bricklayer is closed, and he often is forced to make do with whatever is at hand. जो हमारा टिंकर है, ब्राइकुलर है, उसका जो एरिया है वो sophisticated है, closed है, उसको उतना ही पता है because he is only that much qualified. So his universe is closed, encapsulated, whereas the universe of engineer is open, and that he is able to create new tools and new materials. So it is all about the matter of universe, that one is in closed universe and one is in the open universe. It is not the matter of mind. Mind is same for both. So both live within a restrictive reality, and so engineer is forced to consider the pre-existing set of theoretical and practical knowledge of technical means in similar way to the bricklayer. So both are having the similar type of tasks and they are doing their own tasks. So we cannot say that one is a civilized mind and one is the savage mind. I hope these terms are clear. Bricklayer engineer.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Next term that he derived is mything. That has been taken from myth. So he said that a mything is a fundamental general unit of narrative structure that tells a relationship between a character and an event and a theme. So what is the relationship between a character with the event? That relationship is called mything. एक करेक्टर का उसके इवेंट के साथ जो भी इवेंट हो रहा है वहां पर मिथ में उसके साथ क्या रिलेशनशिप है, हाउ अ करेक्टर इज कनेक्टेड टू अ पर्टिकुलर इवेंट और अ थीम, दैट रिलेशनशिप इज कॉल्ड myth. So it is a minimal unit that is always found shared with others, other related mythins. Means in one myth there can be several mythins. Like there are several characters, so all those characters can be related to different themes, different events. So mythim is a minimal unit that is always found shared with other related mythins and reassembled in various ways or linked in more complicated relationships. So what does it mean? You need to understand mythim hota kya hai. So Strauss has given a very beautiful example, the myth of Adonis and Osiris. Adonis and Osiris are the two Greek gods. They share several elements, and these elements of Adonis and Osiris has been used by many scholars in their literature work. Someone has used Jews in writing their poetry. Someone has used Adonis in their poetry. So different scholars, different writers has used the mythical characters in their own work, and those characters are describing some event in the author's work. So you must have heard about Venus and Adonis, that is a poem by William Shakespeare. So William Shakespeare has used the character Adonis to create an event in his poem, and that event is a love relation between Venus and Adonis. So here Adonis is used as a mythim in Venus and Adonis because it is describing a relationship between Venus and Adonis. So that relationship is called mythim. I hope it is clear.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
This was all main important points about Claude Levi-Strauss. The main thing you have to remember is the book of Claude Levi-Strauss that was published in 1962, The Savage Mind. It consists of two terms, that is the civilized mind and the savage mind. And finally this mythim. Now I'll talk about Michel Foucault. Michel Foucault was a great philosopher, and he has written so many things and so many theories that still people are struggling to interpret his theories. What does it mean? Whatever he has written is beyond the understanding of modern philosophers. जितनी theories दी हैं मिशेल फूको ने, means they are out of the world. Hardly people get understand कि ये कहना क्या चाह रहा है. So let us know he was a French historian and a philosopher. He started his journey with structuralism and followed through post-structuralism. So most of his ideas are related to post-structuralism, but mainly he talked about human beings. So he was not too much connected to literature or poetry or anything else. one thing you must remember that he was a French philosopher. He was from France. His first major work was History of Madness. That is a psychological work. He has written in so many areas. He's just like Shakespeare in literature, like Michel Foucault in criticism. So the first work was History of Madness in the Classical Age. This was the first major work of Michel Foucault. The title itself is very important. History of Madness in the Classical Age. Although he was not a psychologist and he does not relate to the psychological criticism. If I talk about psychological criticism, then the giant name of Sigmund Freud, Jacques Lacan, Otto Rank, these names will come. But Michel Foucault has written on psychological theme, and that book is called History of Madness in the Classical Age, published in 1961. In this work, he traced the madness of human beings through three phases: Renaissance phase, classical, and modern age. And he derived about how madness had passed a journey from Renaissance to modern age. And according to Foucault, there is no one mad. पागल आदमी होता ही नहीं है, according to Michel Foucault. He says that one is mad because we think that he is not acting according to my perspective. मैं जैसा चाहता हूँ वैसा वो behave नहीं कर रहा है. That is the reason he is mad. But in his own perspective, he is not mad. So it is total philosophy of Michel Foucault. He stated that madness is not a natural, unchanging thing, but rather depends on society in which it exists. So for a society, he can be a mad, but for himself, he is not a mad. So madness is not a natural, unchanging thing. The second major publication was The Birth of the Clinic. The first work was psychological. The second work is related to the medicines. The Birth of Clinic in 1963, that describes the philosophical shifting in medical discourse in 19th and 20th century. We must surprise at how intelligent he was, that he wrote in every field, every area, on every topic. The next major work was Discipline and Punish, which laid out the Foucault's thought on how the elite in society dominate and control rest of the society. Means he was talking about why punishment is required. अगर किसी prisoner को prison में रखा जाता है, why? How it affects, how it changes his characters, and how to maintain a discipline so that punishment can differ from person to person. How punishment is related to discipline, and is given so many examples. These are the theories that are given by Michel Foucault: theory of knowledge, theory of power, theory of sexuality, theory of freedom, theory of subjectivity, and theory of body. So I'll go in brief about few of the theories, and some of the theories I will talk in detail. The giant theory is called the theory of power. He is very famous for the power theory. And he says that power circulates in all directions at all the levels. And it is the power which decides everything in everyone's life. The best example is the school. Every child is having different interests. Some child is interested in playing cricket, is very expert. Some child is very interested in mathematics, and some child is interested in science. But all the children are taught the same subject by the same teacher with the same influence with the same topic. Why? The one who is interested in music, he should be taught music so that he can become an expert in that area, according to Foucault. So he says that the school or the institution is in power. Whatever they desire, they will teach. Whether the teacher is right or wrong, the same teacher will keep teaching. So likewise, at every field, there is a power. In the last theory, that is the theory of body, that he is talking about a female body, a women body. He says that there also there is a power that is called a masculine power. In the theory of sexuality, all tortures and punishments to the women that are described by Foucault in his theory of sexuality, where there is a masculinity power, which is powering the femininity power. Then he talks about the theory of knowledge. So that I'll explain this theory in detail. But before that, let us see few of the important works of Foucault that may be asked in the exam. The first work is Dream, Imagination and Existence, published in 1954. Mental Illness and Psychology, 1954 again. Madness and Civilization. In 1961, The Birth of the Clinic, that is 1963. The Order of Things. These all works have been asked somewhere in some of the exams. So each and every work of Michel Foucault is important. You must remember all the titles. Although year of publication you can skip because the year of publication is not that much important. The Archaeology of Knowledge in 1969. The Order of Discourse in 1971. The theory of discourse is another theory which is very famous by Michel Foucault. Till now, we are reading that discourse is any means of communication. Discourse can be an oral discourse, a written discourse, a gesture discourse. Anything that communicates the meaning is called discourse. But in the view of Foucault, discourse is something else. Discourse is something beyond a sentence. So we will also study about the theory of discourse by Michel Foucault. Discipline and Punish in 1975, and The History of Sexuality in 1976. And the last work of Michel Foucault is The Hermeneutics of the Subject in 1982. So these are all the major works of Michel Foucault. Apart from that, he has also written so many essays that were published in different journals. But we must remember these titles of Michel Foucault. The first work that I am going to discuss is Discipline and Punish. It is subtitled The Birth of Prison. The subtitle is very important. Discipline and Punish, The Birth of Prison. So it was published in 1975 and it is an analysis of the social and theoretical mechanism behind the changes that occurred in the Western penal system during the modern age, based on historical documents from France. So it is an analysis of social system and theoretical system. Means what is written in the theory, what rules and regulations are written theoretically, and how it is associated with the social system. For a particular discipline or a particular indiscipline case, what is the punishment that is given in a theoretical documents? And based on those theoretical documents, a punishment is given to a crime. So the main ideas of discipline and punish can be grouped according to 4 parts. So the entire book is divided into 4 parts. First part deals with torture. Second is punishment. Third is discipline, and the number 4 is prison. The torture, he means why a particular man needs a punishment. So he all deals those subjects in torture. Then comes punishment. After one commits a crime, then he goes for a punishment, and he asks a question that whether that punishment is going to change the discipline of a man. Will be a good man after he is given a punishment. And if he is kept in the prison, after he is released from the prison, is he a good man? अगर किसी को पनिशमेंट देने से अगर कोई आदमी सुधर जाता और प्रिजन में डालने से if everybody get change, और अगर नहीं सुधरता है, what is the reason of keeping him in prison? What is the reason of giving punishment? अगर कोई नहीं सुधरता है. So Foucault argues that prison did not become the principal form of punishment just because of the humanitarian concern of reformists. He traces the cultural shifts that led to the predominance of prison via the body and power. He says that when a criminal goes in a prison, there also there is a matter of power. The prison, the people who are controlling the prison, they are in power. And a prisoner will only do the things what is decided by the people who are controlling the prison, the policemen. The policemen are in power. So whatever they will, they wish, the prisoner will do the same thing. So he is not left at his own will. उसको खुद को तो छोड़ा ही नहीं जा रहा कि तू अपने आप को सुधारो. He is working on the will of policemen who are in power. So prison used by the discipline, new technological powers that can also be found according to Foucault in places such as schools, hospitals, and military barracks. So these are all the places where technological power works. Those who are living in hospitals, hospital in the sense patient. Patient is also suffering from power discourse. Patient is only taking the medicine which is prescribed by the doctor. Patient is doing each and every activity which is prescribed by the doctor, because the doctor is in power. Same in the military barracks. All the soldiers are following the order of their officers because the officers are in power. Same in the schools. All the children are following the instructions of their teachers and principals because they are in power. So this power theory is really very concerned to our contemporary situation. There was a term called panopticism, and this panopticism is the title of a chapter in this book, Discipline and Punishment. And this panopticism is taken from Jeremy Bentham's Panopticon. Jeremy Bentham has written a book on the prison. So the same thing has been taken by Michel Foucault as the base. So Jeremy Bentham's Panopticon is taken by Michel Foucault, and he used this as a title, and the title is Panopticism. So panopticism is an architectural plan to reform the prisons at the end of 18th century. As we know that Jeremy Bentham was a very famous philosopher. So while we were discussing about J.S. Mill, we also talked about Jeremy Bentham. So Jeremy Bentham also wrote about the reformation of the prisons. And in that work, Jeremy Bentham talked that can we make a prison like a home, where the prisoner would have the authority to amend themselves. They should not work on the will of the policeman. So those same policies are taken by Michel Foucault also in this Discipline and Punish. So the Panopticon was the ultimate realization of a modern disciplinary institution. It allowed for constant observation characterized by unequal gaze, the constant possibility of observation. Means he's telling that the prisoners who are in the prison, they are all the time under observation. So once they are all the time they are in observation, how they can do at their own? They cannot think of amending themselves. Okay, so panopticism or panopticon was all about the reformation of the prison. The most important feature of panopticon was that it was specifically designed so that the prisoner could never be sure whether they were being observed at any moment. So this was the main theme of Discipline and Punish, or birth of prison. In this book, the main term that was derived by Michel Foucault is panopticism, that you must remember. And what does it mean? It is all about the reformation of the prisons, and it has been taken from Jeremy Bentham's Panopticon that talks about the reformation of the prisons of 18th century. So there can be various questions from this slide that is talking about the prisons of
Sir,
which
could
century?
you please repeat the second point from the last?
The last point is all about panopticism. Panopticism is the major term which is used by Foucault in Discipline and Punish. Panopticism is all talking about making the reformation of the prison. पहले फूको ने क्या बोला कि जो prison है they are made for punishment, but punishment से क्या होता है? Punishment से क्या कोई disciplined हो जाता है? अगर कोई क्रिमिनल है तो क्या वो एक सिविलाइज्ड हो जाता है? So he said कि prisoner जो है वो जब prison में है, he is all the time in the supervision of the policeman, and policemen are in power. वो कुछ भी गलती करेगा, कुछ भी करने की कोशिश करेगा, he will beat by the policeman. Policeman उसको पीटेंगे. So जो हमारा क्रिमिनल है, अगर वो सुधरना भी चाहता है तो he will not be able to amend itself. और प्रिजन में रखने से कुछ नहीं होता है. प्रिजन को रिफॉर्म करना चाहिए. प्रिजन should be like a home. So there is a requirement of reformation of the prison, so that if we are giving any punishment to amend the discipline of a criminal, he must change his character, change his attitude, and become a good man. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Sir, unequal gaze means constant observation.
Yes,
Okay, sir.
because he is facing unequal gauges, means there are different types of policemen in the prison. So all are not equal. Gauge means observation. Unequal means different observations.
Okay, thank you.
The next important work is the next important essay is what is an author. Although this was not a book, it was published in a magazine, but it is very controversial and very famous. What is an author? एक author क्या होता है? So this essay was published just after Discipline and Punish in 1975. In this work, Foucault investigated what we mean when we say author. अगर हम एक word बोलते हैं author तो इसका मतलब क्या होता है? And he concluded that we mean many different things. अगर author बोलते हैं तो it indicates so many things. So this test has been interpreted to mean that for Foucault, authors do not exist. Foucault said that authors do not exist. This is quite controversial. So to help excavate several meanings of the term author, Foucault used the phrase author function. Author का function क्या है? To help differentiate historically different roles that label author has served. So he gave a best example by comparing an author with a scientist. So he gave an example that is a historical change in the author function with regard to literature as scientific writing. एक author का historical change कैसे हुआ और एक scientist का historical change कैसे हुआ? So he says that before the 17th century, they were anonymous works. When we were reading about the Elizabethan literature in the era of Chaucerian literature, so we found so many anonymous works जिसका writer का पता ही नहीं है. So he says that before the 17th century, literature, painting and music were identified with particular authors. And this kind of works could become accepted into the culture without having to be legitimized by some author's name. 17th century के पहले के जो works थे, उनको accept किया जाता था without author's name. Author का name नहीं है, although it was accepted by the people. But in contrast, during those early periods, means those period before 17th century, works of science would only be acceptable in the culture if they were legitimized with the name of respected scientist. कोई भी invention होता था तो उसमें scientist का नाम आना जरूरी था. भाई इस scientist ने ये खोज की है. So there was a contrast before 17th century between an author and a scientist. Author का book पे नाम नहीं है, then also it is acceptable. But अगर scientist ने कोई खोज की है और उस scientist का नाम नहीं है, then it is not acceptable. Any doubt in the slide? Okay, let's move ahead. He said that this arrangement of authorship changed with the time. जैसे जैसे समय बीतता गया, ये जो हमारा कॉन्ट्रास्ट था कि बिना ऑथर के नाम के बुक जो था वो फेमस हो सकता था, बट एक साइंस वर्क जो है बिना साइंटिस्ट के नाम के इट कुड नॉट बी एक्सेप्टेड. बट दिस थिंग हैज एंटायरली चेंज्ड विद द टाइम. And in the modern time, the thing has completely reversed. अभी आज के जो means in the time of Michel Foucault, he said that in the modern period, an author's work cannot be accepted without author's name. Scientific works were acceptable without the label of a respected scientist, as long as the work carried the textual clues of science or the earmarks of scientific discourse. But आज के जमाने में nobody knows कि Xiaomi मोबाइल किसने बनाया, किसी को मतलब नहीं. कोई नया एयर कंडीशन आया, कोई नया इन्वेंशन हुआ, किसने किया, nobody knows. Everything is accepted without the knowledge of the name of the scientist. A scientist is only known when he receives a Nobel Prize. कि भाई इसने ये किया था इसलिए इसको Nobel Prize मिला. Otherwise, nobody is worried about any scientist, any scientific work. But every book which is published is only under the name of an author. Without author's name, you will not find any book published in the modern period. So this is called the author's function. So he says that works of art could gain acceptability only when they were attached to the specific authors or the creators. We know and select music and novels based on who wrote and who performed or who sang the song. So we decide our preferences according to author. ये अगर चेतन भगत ने लिखा है, then I'll read. However, this is not how we recognize scientific inventions or theories nowadays. Scientific knowledge is seldom validated on the basis of who the author was. Who has invented anything, we are not worried about. So Foucault says that author function had faded from scientific discourse. And he gave a very famous quotation that it is about time that criticism and philosophy acknowledge the disappearance or the death of the author. It is about time, means with the gradual time, and because of the criticism and philosophy, there is a disappearance of the author in the past times. So he says that in the past times, who has written the work was not important. But in the present time, it is very important that who has written the work. Then he gives his own argument that the one who has written the work, is he able to express his own intention? Means author intention जो है अपना दे पा रहा है क्या? Author तो वही है जो 17th century के पहले था. The same author is now also. पहले भी author अपना intention नहीं दे पाता था. Nowadays also he is not able to give his intention. So author is not existing. Author do not exist. This what he want to say. He gave another major contribution in this essay, and this is founders of discursivity. Discursivity means a writer who gives so many meanings. So who was the first one who is a discursive writer, discursive author? As I said, that author means, if I take a name author, author indicates so many things. So who is the founder of this discursivity? Discursivity means many things. So he gives two examples. One is Karl Marx and the other is Sigmund Freud. He said that by founders of discursivity means these authors' names stand for more than a particular individual or a single idea. अगर कार्ल मार्क्स का नाम ले रहे हैं तो कार्ल मार्क्स represents so many things. It's not representing one single idea. He was a communist, or he talked about the class struggle, or who are so many scholars attached with Marxism. Same with the Sigmund Freud. If we take the name Sigmund Freud, he has given so many ideas like id, ego, superego, dream, sexuality, libido. So many things are. So we cannot say that Freud is talking about a single idea. Freud means different ideas. Karl Marx means different different theories, different ideas. So these two are the founders of discursivity. Discursivity, again, I'll reiterate, discursivity means deriving more than one meaning. So when we say Marx, we usually mean Marxism. By Marx, we mean an entire body of scholarship, ideas of Marxism, theories of Marxism. Foucault used the example of Marx to show us the term author means different things. So there is a prolific range of political writings that use the term capital or class struggle. And we associate the entire body of literature, and that discourse is related to Karl Marx. So Marx is therefore the founder of discursivity along with Sigmund Freud, because their name is associated with a philosophy, Marxist philosophy, and Freud is related to psychoanalysis. So without Sigmund Freud, their psychoanalysis cannot exist. Without Karl Marx, Marxism does not exist. So they are the precursors of discursivity. If we say the author is dead, that just means that our old assumptions about an author is obsolete. Old assumption हमारा क्या था कि without author's name, a work can exist. But nowadays it has totally obsolete. Although the author is dead, today also the author is dead, but we do not accept it. So this was all about the ideas that he has given in what is an author. Is it clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, the next is the theory of sexuality. The history of sexuality is a work that is in the 4 volume. In this work, he has given the theory of sexuality, in which he is talking about the women body as a subject of torture, and using masculinity as a force of power over female body. So he divided this book into 4 volumes. The first volume is entitled The Will to Knowledge. It was published in 1976, and in English it was in 1978. The second volume is entitled The Use of Pleasure. The third one is Care of the Shelf, and the fourth one is Confession of the Flesh. It's talking about the flesh of women body. The Confession of the Flesh was published just 2 years back posthumously in 2018. So the name of the volumes are important. The next is Archaeology of Knowledge. This was another treatise of Michel Foucault, published in 1969, The Archaeology of Knowledge, in which he gives the theory of knowledge. So this is the book in which Foucault promotes archaeology, or the archaeological methods, and that is called an analytical method. The same method he used in different books, that is archaeological methods. These books are Madness and Civilization, The Birth of the Clinic, and The Order of Things. There was a question in one of the foreign university that which are the books in which he's talking about the archaeological methods. So these are the books where he's talking about this theme. Foucault's premise is that systems of thought and knowledge are governed by rules. हमारे दिमाग में क्या विचार आएंगे और हमें क्या knowledge लेना चाहिए, it's not depend upon our own. हम खुद नहीं decide कर सकते कि हम क्या बनेंगे. It is decided by the rules and regulations. अगर कोई child सोचता है कि नहीं मुझे डॉक्टर बनना है, but the situation does not allow, that means the power does not allow. So likewise in our day-to-day life, हम वो हर चीज नहीं कर सकते जो हम चाहते हैं, because many times we are bound by the rules and regulations. So that is the reason he says that knowledge is not power. हमने एक कहावत सुनी थी, knowledge is power. Foucault says no, power is knowledge. अगर आपके पास power है, then you have the knowledge. Without power, knowledge cannot exist. And it is very true what I think. Power is knowledge. So people who are in power, whatever they teach, we have to learn. So power is knowledge, according to Foucault. So he said that knowledge are governed by the rules. These rules are beyond the grammar and logic. We cannot find any reason for those rules. Why there is a, we cannot find any logic. Illogical rules, which operate beneath the consciousness of an individual subject and define a system of conceptual possibilities that determines the boundaries of thought and language used in a given domain and period. Means the boundaries of our thought and language is not decided by ourselves. It is decided by the rules and regulations in which we are bounded. So I hope you have got the meaning of what is the archaeology of knowledge. Clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now he is comparing power and knowledge together. कि power का knowledge के साथ क्या relationship? He says that knowledge is, power is knowledge. And he says that power circulates in all direction. Power केवल एक जगह नहीं है. It is circulating everywhere in all the aspects of the society, to and from all the social levels, at all times. हर जगह power ही power है. And we all are bounded with those power theories. He says that the vehicle by which the power circulates is a never-ending process. So he says that power circulates through three modes or three mediums. The first one is the exchange of material goods through such practices as buying and selling. Buying and selling may be power. If you are going to a shop and if we want to purchase rice, हम राइस वही खरीदेंगे जो दुकानदार दिखाएगा. He is in power. Gambling, bartering, taxation, charity, and various forms of theft. So everywhere he is talking about power. What is bartering?
Sir, exchanging of one good
Exchange
to
of
another good.
exchange of goods. The second mode is the exchange of people. So he says that the institutions like marriage, in marriage also there is a power, where a female is governed by a male. Adoption, adopting a child, kidnapping, slavery, everywhere there is a power. Exchange of ideas through the various discourse a cultural produces. So in the exchange of ideas also there is a power. When we are going to talk with a psychologist for counseling, he exchanges so many ideas with us. But again, we have to follow his idea because he is in power. So these are the three mediums through which the power circulates. The next theory that is given is the discourse theory. Till now, we know that discourse means any mode of communication, but for Michel Foucault, discourse is beyond these all things. He adopted the term discourse to denote a historically contingent social system that produces knowledge and meaning. He says that a discourse is historically created and it has come through a contingent social system. हमने आज खुद का डिस्कोर्स नहीं बनाया है. It has come from the history. knowledge can only be shared in the form of discourse. Without discourse, knowledge cannot be shared. For Foucault, the logic produced by a discourse is structurally related to the broader structure of knowledge of the historical period in which it arises. Discourse is structurally related to the broader structure of knowledge. It is not only the statements or the sentences. It is a broader view that has been taken from the historical period. He says that discourse is something like a way of conditioning the people. And sometimes it also spoils the thinking of the people. This is quite a controversial statement given by Michel Foucault. Conditioning of the people means we get habituated of something. There was a psychologist whose name was Pablo, and he was doing a research on the conditioning. So for that he had kept a dog, और हर दिन वो डॉग को मीट खिलाता था, और जब भी वो मीट खिलाता था घंटी बजाता था. हर दिन जब भी वो घंटी मीन्स मीट खिलाए घंटी बजाए, मीट खिलाए घंटी बजाए. एंड आफ्टर द डॉग वाज कंडीशन्ड फॉर दैट, एक दिन उसने क्या किया, मीट नहीं खिलाया और केवल घंटी बजाया. देन ही फाउंड दैट कुत्ते के मुंह में पानी आ गया. दैट मीन्स the dog has been conditioned for a particular situation. Likewise, Michel Foucault also gives an example of human beings that when they passes through a traffic post, वो अपनी गाड़ी को slow कर लेते हैं. They are conditioned for that, automatic condition. So he says that discourse is something like making a man conditioned, and it stops the thinking of the people. So that is the reason he says that it spoils the thinking of the people. So Foucault's concept of discourse can be simplified as discourse is not just the language of an individual communication, but the larger system of thought within a particular historical location that makes certain things thinkable and sayable and regulating who can say them. So he combines the two things together, that is a thought process and a communication process. So by combining a thought process and a communication process, he named this discourse. किस तरह से सोचना है, किस तरह से बोलना है, all the things, and जो हम सोच रहे हैं, that has how it is related to our historical discourse. वो भी हमें सोचना है, history से कैसे connected है. So all these things together is called discourse according to him. So he gives a very famous quotation where he says that we can not learn a particular discourse by practice. So he says that discursive practices are not purely and simply modes of manufacture of discourse. तो फिर कैसे बनता है discourse? They take shape in technical ensembles in institutions. We can learn these discourses in the institutions, in behavioral schemes, in types of transmission and dissemination, in pedagogical forms. Pedagogical means in the educational forms that both impose and maintain them. So these are the ways how we can develop good discourse qualities. The next is the theory of power. Foucault's analysis of power came into two forms. जो उसने power theory दी, वो दो form में दी. One is called empirical power and the one is theoretical power. Empirical power means pertaining to experience, practical, and one is theoretical. So there can be a question the types of forms or the types of powers developed by Michel Foucault. One is empirical or practical. The second is theoretical. First is talking about empirical. The empirical analysis concern themselves with historical forms of power and how this emerged from previous forms of power. And he divides empirical power into three categories: sovereign power, disciplinary power, and biopower. So these three categories are also important from exam point of view. Empirical power is divided into three types: sovereign power, disciplinary power, and biopower. अब ये तीनों चीजें क्या हैं? Sovereign power is the power structure that is similar to a pyramid. Like we must have seen a hierarchy pyramid where one person or group of people at the top holds the power, while the normal or the oppressed people are generally at the bottom of the pyramid. And those people who are in the middle of the pyramid, they enforce the rules and regulations decided by the one who is sitting at the top. So this type of distribution of power is called sovereign power. The next is disciplinary power. It aims to use the body's skills as effectively as possible. Body skill of human beings. किसके पास जितनी स्किल है उसको जितने effectively use कर सकते हैं. So disciplinary power is focused on individuals as the object. एक इंडिविजुअल जो है वो ऑब्जेक्ट है और उस ऑब्जेक्ट को मैक्सिमम यूटिलाइज कितना यूटिलाइज किया जा सकता है. So an individual is used as a target and instrument. So disciplinary power takes all the outputs from an individual. Whereas biopower, bio means life. So Foucault refers as power over bias means power over population. एक population को power से कैसे control किया जाए, that is called biopower. So it primarily rests on the norms which are internalized by people rather than the external force. It studies the population regarding number of births, life expectancy, public health, housing, migration, crime, which social groups are overrepresented in deviations from the norm, and try to adjust, control or eliminate these norms deviation. Biopower के तहत we decide कि how many children one should produce. That is a biopower. एक individual को कितना पढ़ना चाहिए, what should be the literacy. So everything that is the internal structure of human beings is decided by the external force is called biopower. Means we can say that through biopower, a huge population can be controlled. He considered his own theory of power to be closer to a method than a typical theory. He said that my theory of power is not a type of theory, it is a method to explain the use of power. So he says that force relations are an effect to difference, inequality, or unbalance that exist in other forms of relationship, such as sexual power, economic power, etc. So force and power is not something that a person or group holds, but rather so is power a complex group of forces. Power is a complex group of forces that comes from everything and therefore exists everywhere. Power एक जगह से नहीं आता है. Power comes from different directions. It comes from different groups. And that is the reason it exists everywhere. Relation of power always result from inequality, difference, unbalance, and it also means that power always has a goal or purpose. Power आता कैसे है? When there is an inequality between a master and a worker, inequality between a student and teacher. So wherever there is an inequality or there is a difference, then power is automatically produced. These were all the matters of Michel Foucault. There are so many things to talk about Michel Foucault, but we have only discussed which are important from exam point of view. Otherwise, if we talk about Michel Foucault for days together, his matters are not going to finish. The next is Louis Althusser. Louis Althusser is a French Marxist philosopher, and he has applied structuralism in Marxism. क्लाउड लेवी स्ट्रॉस ने क्या किया था? स्ट्रक्चरलिज्म को एंथ्रोपोलॉजी पे अप्लाई किया था. मिशेल फुको ने स्ट्रक्चरलिज्म को लाइफ के ऊपर अप्लाई किया, एंड अल्थुसर ने स्ट्रक्चरलिज्म को मार्क्सिज्म के ऊपर अप्लाई किया. So he is known as a structural Marxist, but he is also related to the French structuralism. In his 1995 work on the reproduction, he developed a concept, ideology and ideological state apparatus. This is the very famous concept given by Louis Althusser. अगर हम Althusser पढ़ रहे हैं तो we must know ideology and ideological state apparatus. ये पहचान है Althusser की. Ideology and ideological state apparatus is the identity of Althusser. So this concept became very influential on the ideology discussion, and in the same year he wrote Marxism and Class Struggle. In ideology and ideological state apparatus, Althusser mentions two major mechanisms for ensuring that people within a state behave according to the rules of a state, even when it is not in their best interest in regard to their class position to do so. ये तो हमें पता है कि Marxism is all talks about the class struggle, the struggle of the upper class and the lower class. Lower class को upper class से कैसे बचाया जाए, that all Marxism talks about. So Althusser in the ideology and ideological state apparatus, हमें ये भी देखना है कि Althusser is a postmodern philosopher, whereas Marxism, Das Kapital was written in 1848. So he is more than 100 years after Marxists were existing. So Althusser mentions two major mechanisms to ensure that people within a state behave according to the rules of the state. Rules and regulation, whatever is decided by the state, they have to behave according to that. चाहे वो उनके हक में हो, चाहे उनके अगेंस्ट में हो. कोई भी रूल किसी के लिए बना है किसी स्टेट में, तो वो हर कोई के लिए फायदे का नहीं हो सकता है. For some people it will be for betterment, and for some people it will be against of the some people. So he says that the mechanism are ideological state apparatus and repressive state apparatus. अब जो रूल है जिसके लिए अच्छा है, so that is called ideological state apparatus, but जिनके लिए खराब है, that is called repressive state apparatus. So ideological state apparatus and repressive state apparatus are the part of ideology. Ideology क्या है? State की ideology क्या है? What is the ideology of that particular state? So we can say that ideology can be divided into two parts. That is ideological state apparatus and repressive state apparatus. He also gave the very famous concept of interpellation. So two things you must remember about Althusser. One is ideology and ideological state apparatus, and the second is the important concept that is given by Louis Althusser in his ideology and ideological state apparatus is called interpellation. It appeared in his 1995 book on the reproduction, This interpellation is all about the ideology that is being followed by a group of people who are divided in the society between two parts. One is called ideological state apparatus and the other is called repressive state apparatus. Althusser divides the society into two categories. The people who are having their own rules and regulations and they enjoy their life following their own rules and regulation, they are under the ideological state apparatus. Whereas the people who are controlled by the government and they have to follow the rules and regulation of the government, they comes under repressive state apparatus. So they have to follow a particular ideology in their life. The way Althusser gives an example of a friend, that when a friend visits the house of another friend, he has to knock the door. That is a ritual, that is a ideology. And the one who is inside only opens the door when the sound outside is familiar to him. So when the sound outside is familiar to him, then he will open the door. That is a type of ideological recognition of ritual. So this is also a type of ideology. Apart from that, there are several ideologies in our life, like greeting or shaking hand when two people meet together is also a type of ideology. So similar type of ideologies has to be followed by the group of people who are living in the society, but there are the different rituals, there are the different interpolation that is to be followed by different groups of people, because he divided the society into two groups of people, so they are having their own interpolation. So a mixture of RSA, that is repressive state apparatus, and ideological state apparatus, the ideology of these two group of people is called interpellation. So he says that ISA belongs to the private domain, that is the ideological state apparatus belongs to the private domain, and it refers to private institutions like family, church, media and politics. This all comes under the private domain because they have their own rules and regulation. They are not governed by the government. They can make their own rules. Whereas the public institutions is called repressive state apparatus, which is controlled by police, military, and the government. So they have to follow a set of rules and regulation made by the government, and whether they like it or do not like it, they have to follow those instructions. So that is the reason they comes under the repressive state apparatus, and they also have to follow a particular ideology. So whatever the ideology that is being followed by RSA and ISA is called interpellation. So interpellation describes the process by which ideology is embodied in the major social and political institution of repressive state apparatus, and ideological state apparatus constitute the very nature of individual subjects' identities through the process of hailing them in social interaction. Hailing them in the social interaction in the sense that their ideology hails from which social group, because both of them are having their own ideology. So I hope this interpellation is clear to you.